Okay, well, good morning, and we are on lesson 53, which is the third set of review lessons from the first 50 lessons. And there's a term, there's an interesting word that Jesus uses in second actually. No, is it the third? It's the third of the review, and it says a meaningless world engenders fear. And it was interesting, there's a point in time when Jesus is talking to Helen, and he says he has gone to great effort to use words in a way in which they carry the meaning that he's attempting to convey, and to the best of his ability cannot be mistaken or misunderstood. So they do carry the meaning that he wants to convey. So we come to this: a meaningless world engenders fear. That totally insane engenders fear because it is completely undependable and offers no ground for trust. Nothing in madness is dependable. It holds out no safety and no hope. But such a world is not real. I have given it the illusion of reality and suffered from my belief in it. And when we're talking about the idea of having a split mind, we're talking about the ego as the idea of separation, and we come to a word such as engender. I really had to ask, what was the use of the word? And if you understand the idea of gender, then you would understand the idea of engendering as a way of inducing continued separation upon the perfection and wholeness of a reality of our soul, and our souls being the sum total of God's creation. And as souls, we are told, and if you've ever experienced yours, that there's a complete equality amongst souls. Souls are totally equal in their creation, and the sharing of the soul ensures the oneness of the soul. And the use of the word share, as Jesus says, is to make alike. So in God sharing himself with all of us, he made us all alike. The idea of engender is the idea of the split, in that we're even split between men and women. We've engendered fear, and the engendering of fear into the split goes a long way to help us continue thinking that the happiness that we would like to experience would have to involve the inclusion of the other half of what we term the human species, or even within ourselves. When people talk about getting in touch with the feminine, and she's more male than female, that is the idea of engendering fear. We're split, we're fragmented, and we continue to fragment from the split. So the initial split affected absolutely everything, and the reality of our soul and the ability to know our souls as alike, to know each other as a soul and being alike. We've divided ourselves into gender and continue to utilize the division of our perfection into genders in attempt to figure out, well, if we're like God, is God male or is God female? No. A meaningless world engenders fear. It reinforces the idea of the split to make the perfection and the oneness and the alikeness, the sameness, not visible to us within the world of space and time. Therefore, we become quite susceptible to the egoic thinking when we identify with it in any way, because it fosters what the Course talks about as it fosters the constant asking of the same question in a myriad of forms. How did the impossible happen? And if we attempt to solve the problem of how did the impossible happen utilizing anything in the world of space and time, we run into the split as operable in all phases, in all aspects, and there's no answer. The answer to how did the impossible happen eventually comes in an experience of certainty that the impossible did not happen, the impossible could not happen, the impossible is not happening now, and any illusion of the impossible having taken form is totally meaningless, and, as this goes on to say, chaotic, undependable, not constant, and it only offers an illusion of reality. It offers no solution to the problem whatsoever. The guides that I have and the guides that I utilize, in addition to Jesus, who call themselves the Tech Crew, told me at one point in time, there's a big question about what enlightenment is, what is being awake, are you awake in the dream, do you awaken from the dream? And that's the type of meaningless conversation, meaningless discussion that can't be solved from within the illusion of space and time at all. And you have to allow your mind the freedom that we get by doing and working with the lessons of, say, A Course in Miracles, to provide enough space between the concepts and enough recognition that there's no way we're going to rearrange our concepts in order to find the solution that we're looking for within them, to allow your mind, or the light that's all around you and below you and within you, to slip in, because much like the illusion of space and time, and this is one way of looking at it, consciousness is the domain of the ego, much like, wholeness is the domain of the soul. Our wholeness, the wholeness of reality, is the domain of our soul. So it's in a sense holographic. As much as we look at the world as being holographic, the solution is likewise the same, meaning any little bit, any little glimpse of light that gets in offers us the totality of the solution. And if we don't blink, that solution grows in strength and magnitude, hope, and the self-realization that we require to know who we are and know who our brother is, beyond the illusion of separation that has engendered fear, beyond the illusion of separation in space and time. So a meaningless world engenders fear, makes us look outside of ourselves for our completion in our relationships, makes us look even the way the ego has us look within. Because when the ego has us look within, it has us look within with the same eyes that we're looking without. Which is why we come up with the idea of, oh, she's more male than female, or he's got to get in touch with his feminine. That's all just utilizing the eyes of the ego, the body's eyes, to continue to look for a solution where the solution will never be found. Solution will never be found in utilizing those eyes. That's why the Course talks about vision so much. The Holy Spirit induces visions, the vision of truth, wherein which there is no separation. There is no, in a sense, differentiation of wholeness. We are all perfectly whole units within the perfect whole totality of our reality, and that can never be undone or can never be affected, because God would not have it be so, because that's in effect what God is. So God did not create a meaningless world. How can a meaningless world exist if God did not create it? He's the source of all meaning, and everything that is real is in his mind. It's in your mind too, because he created it with me, created it as me. I am God's love. It's closer then, well, God loves me and I love God. No, in that respect, there's no differentiation. I am God's love, shining in the reflection of Him, of His love, and perfection, shining in the perfection and as the reflection of His love. So why should I continue to suffer from the effects of my own insane thoughts when the perfection of creation is my home? Indeed, why should I continue to suffer from the effects of my own insane thoughts when the perfection of creation is His home, is my home? Let me remember the power. Let me remember the power of my decision and recognize where I really abide. One of the things that I talk about on occasion is self-realization without the actualization of that self, because we have been in a condition of self-actualization of an illusionary self and have acted out based on our thought that that's the nature of who we are. The only way to prove to ourselves, and also the only way for heaven and earth to cease to exist as separate states, is to go take the next step from self-realization to self-actualization, the actualization of the reality of the self that we're coming to know as abiding eternally and infinitely in the abundance of reality. There's a line in the Course where it talks about you're always teaching. Teaching goes on non-stop. It's a constant occupation of God's Son in space and time. And you're always teaching based on the self that you think you are. And to teach is to demonstrate. So when we're in a state of unconsciousness, when we're still in the forgetting, when we're still sleeping, when we're still operating based on that meaningless question of how the impossible happened, and actualizing the meaningless question through our actions based on separation that's engendered fear, when we act upon those even unwittingly, we make a world of space and time. We've actualized a false self. Now, as we come to know the truth of who we are in our self, big S realization, we just as much must take those realizations and begin to actualize them by putting them into practice in all that we do. Join the Great Crusade, Jesus would say. Listen to my voice. Learn how to learn from them the errors that we've made and how to undo those errors and do something about them, do something to correct them, because it's in the action wherein which we prove the trust of the realizations that we have. And in proving the trust of the realizations that we've had to ourselves, we begin to become a demonstration of self-realization with a capital Self, rather than a demonstration of self-actualization of the illusionary self that believes in the engenderment of fear in space and time. So my thoughts are images that I have made. Whatever I see reflects my thoughts. It is my thoughts that tell me where I am and what I am. The fact that I see a world in which there is suffering and loss and death shows me that I am seeing only the representation of my insane thoughts. And I am not allowing any real thoughts to cast their beneficent light on what I see. And as we come to know ourselves as the light of the world, we begin to shine that light on the errors, and as they're corrected in our mind, and we correct them indeed, we begin to demonstrate a new way of living with a new certainty of who we are, so that we can be in the world but not of the world, and take another giant step in the undoing of the world of space and time and the actualization of the kingdom of heaven right where we are right now, because we never left it. You don't really leave the world of space and time to go to heaven. You undo the thoughts that prevent you from seeing that heaven is here, heaven is now, and I've never left my eternal, loving, infinite home, wherein which I've always abided with my Father in the abundance of the kingdom. In the story of the prodigal son, it's the prodigal son who seems to get all the attention in the story and all the reflection of the thoughts, and yet there was a son who never left home, who wonders what's the big deal. What's the big deal? I never went anywhere. I've always been at home. I've always been here in service to my Father. And yet the Father says, son, you've been with me always. There's great rejoicing when one returns, and no loss of the joy in the rejoicing. There's no loss when we sit at the table of abundance, of reality, and allow ourselves to participate in the communion by receiving the daily bread. The reception of the daily bread within the kingdom ensures that as we give of what we receive, the kingdom itself grows. That's the nature of tithing, the true nature of tithing that Jesus offers us. It's not to maintain an establishment. It's meant to give back to the greater so that the greater is constantly increasing and is resupplied by our own giving. And therefore we can receive more because we've given more, and the kingdom of heaven grows and expands. We have a big problem as humans because we've made nothing into something. We don't understand that creation is a constant expansion of reality, where once there was nothing, there was now reality. But when we make nothing into something, we think that there's a combat going on between darkness and light, and there is not a combat going on. There's no comparison. We've engendered the fear of opposition into our own minds in each and everything we do, and into the way we look at ourselves and reflect upon ourselves as well. There's no solution within the world of space and time, within the concepts that we've utilized. And if we utilize, and the ego can use these concepts because it learns faster than we can remember, and it's going to use all these concepts against us because we think in the reconceptualization we find the answer, and we don't. It's always in the release of concepts that the answer is found. The fact that I see a world in which there is suffering and loss and death shows me that I am seeing only the representation of my insane thoughts, and I'm not allowing my real thoughts to cast a beneficent light on what I see. Yet, God's way is sure. The images I have made cannot prevail against them. The images that we utilize to engender fear. The splitting of the species into male and female, and what goes on between the male and the female, and thought that we're different and we're trying to get something, give something that we don't have in order to receive something that we think they have that we don't have, and back and forth. And the images I have made cannot prevail against him, because it is not my will that they do. My will and his will is one, because God's will is one, and I'm not separate from that oneness. So we must begin. I will place no other gods before him. We must begin to recognize that the kingdom of heaven is where the will of the Father and the will of the Son are in perfect accord. So Jesus says, will ye, will you, you will you the kingdom of heaven, by recognizing that that's still within you, below where all the fear has been engendered, below the lower chakras that we utilize in the bodily association. Below that and beyond that is our reality, and we're closing that gap that seems to have separated utilizing the membrane of separation, body and the physical world, as a denotation of that representation. As we open our mind to light, the light begins to unite. The light above unites with the light below, and we begin to end the separation, and we begin to see through its illusion of differences into the sameness and the reality of our soul as being one and sharing in the oneness of the kingdom.